In the tropical forests of Brazil, where rivers snake between trees and swell here and there into belly-like lakes, tales are told of a lonely fairy woman known as Yara. Also called the Lady or Mother of Waters, Yara is a siren-like fairy inextricably linked with the watery places of the Amazon. Yara is most often described as a stunningly beautiful woman, though witnesses rarely agree on her specific appearance. Sometimes described with green eyes, sometimes blue or brown, sometimes with blonde hair, sometimes black or even green. These varied descriptions suggest Iara may be a shapeshifter, appearing as the perfect woman to each individual who lays eyes on her. For what better way to disorient unsuspecting humans than to appear as their own personal visual ideal? Though when Iara first appears, she often doesn't appear physically at all, but as a disembodied voice echoing between the trees. Iara's singing voice is so magical and hypnotic that those that hear it are inevitably drawn from their companions and from the well-worn paths they were traveling into the tangled wood. Oblivious now to dangerous plants, insects, or animals, a human under the spell of Yara will fumble through the brush, drawn by that stunning voice closer and closer to the water. It is only once an entranced human has neared the water's edge that Yara will reveal herself fully, her beautiful hair rippling over her shoulders as she signals for her human victim to join her in the deep. Few who have followed Yara into the water have lived to tell the tale. Some have described reaching out for this beautiful woman, only to find her fade away into dead sea foam, leaving them helplessly lost and at the mercy of any number of watery creatures. But most who encounter Yara are not so lucky and disappear forever, their bodies never found. For this reason, some have speculated that Yara does not kill her victims, but takes them down to some underwater palace to live a life of ecstasy in her arms. But this may be wishful thinking. There is another creature from Brazil closely related to Yara called Ipupiara that suggests a much more sinister end awaits those drawn by Yara's song. The Ipupiara is a monstrous seaman, a man-eater who crushes people to death like a giant snake and then devours them. It is possible that Iara and the Ipupiara are one and the same. The beautiful woman draws victims to the water and then transforms into a vicious monster, dragging unfortunate victims to a terrible end. Whatever the case, if you ever find yourself wandering the forests of Brazil and hear a beautiful voice calling you from between the trees, it's best to ignore it. Stay close to your friends and stay on the path that leads away from the water. Tales of trolls are told in whispers all over the world. Stories of these beings, giant, hulking, ogre-like, lurking in the world's dark places, under hill and mountain, in caves and rock faces, crop up again and again in legends and fairy lore. But only in Iceland do these whispers take solid form. Icelandic troll lore may ring familiar to anyone who has read Tolkien's The Hobbit. In that story, 3 trolls are tricked into staying out past sunrise. Once the light of the sun hits them, they are instantly transformed into stone. Icelandic trolls are believed to have the same weakness. These strictly nocturnal beings cannot be exposed to sunlight, even for an instant, for a single beam of light making contact with their skin has the power to calcify them into rock. For this reason, trolls avoid the light of day at all costs, cloistering themselves deep in the earth when the sun is high, and emerging only rarely under the protective cover of darkness. When Icelandic trolls do lumber out of their deep caves, they do so for a reason. Stories are told of trolls kidnapping pretty humans, whether male or female, as unwilling mates, dragging them down into the dark and the damp, never to be seen again. Sometimes trolls emerge for less sinister reasons, to retrieve some needed provision, a piece of human ingenuity not available underground. At other times they rise from beneath to settle disputes that have come to blows. Because of their great size and strength, fighting underground would pose a serious risk, possibly destabilizing caverns or causing crashing cave-ins. And so, these trolls claw their way to the surface and then battle out in the open, using anything at hand, tree trunks and boulders, glaciers and rock slides, to smash, to destroy, to kill, to win. But, as you can imagine, there are bound to be times when these risk-taking trolls do not make it back underground before the light of dawn brightens the sky. In Iceland, this has happened more than once. In fact, giant trolls petrified forever into rock pepper the landscape. Touring the craggy sea cliffs of Ircenrraat, you'll find dozens of rock-bound trolls, the most famous of which includes a pair of trolls caught in the act of dragging a ship with 3 masts to the shore, and then becoming solidified. You'll find jagged-nosed troll heads protruding from mountainsides, trolls in the middle of battles, petrous with anger, trolls dragging clubs or contemplating the sky, and even one full troll family, frozen forever into rock. And indeed, Icelandic trolls are beings of rock. Whether petrified or not, they spend their whole lives under layers of stone. And if you don't want to suffer the same fate, avoid the rocky places of Iceland after nightfall, or else be ready with a good distraction like Bilbo Baggins was to keep the trolls from dragging you beneath before the sun rises. In Romania, there's a type of nocturnal fairy known only as they, or Ieles. These ghostly creatures appear as beautiful young women, ethereal and delicate as spider webs on the wind. With long wispy hair and tangled dresses, Ieles surface only at night, the silver of the moonlight reflecting off their pale skin. When they appear, the Ieles are known for one thing above all. They dance. With strings of bells tied to their ankles and drizzling candles in their hands, the Ieles dance, round and round in circles, sometimes staid and solemn in flowing white dresses, at other times naked and wild. The Ieles gather for their dances in forests, clearings, at crossroads, or by natural springs, twirling under the stars, ankle bells jangling, the wind and the mist whipped up by their revels. Why Ieles dance is unknown, though there are many theories. Some say their intricate dances are part of some fairy ritual, a building up of magic or the worship of a fairy king or queen. Others say the Ieles dance for the same reason we do, to celebrate or blow off steam or attract a mate. Darker theories suggest the Ieles dance because they must. Cursed by some powerful fairy for an unknown crime, they must dance and dance and dance, on into forever and never stop. Whatever the reason for their dancing, we know one thing for certain. Ieles do not tolerate witnesses. If you were ever to come across the Ieles dancing in the moonlight, if they were to turn their white heads, eyes flashing, hair moving as if under water, and see you standing there, you might never see another thing as long as you live. For Ieles are known to mete out punishments to those who witness their revels. Some have lost their eyesight to the Ieles, others their voices. Others still have suffered severe mutilations at the hands of these beautiful and terrible fairies who value their privacy above all. From Ieles lore, we also learn of the concept of scorching. For whatever they touch, whatever land they dance upon becomes scorched, carbonized so that the grass can no longer grow there, and the land is left black and wilted. Eventually, grass may return to these places, but in strange shades, red or dark green, and sometimes mushrooms will spring up. Mushroom circles, discolored grass, or areas where vegetation refuses to grow are said to have been scorched by these fairies. Animals tend to avoid these places and refuse to graze there. It is said that we humans should avoid them too. Crossing over circles scorched by the Ieles is said to bring frightening streaks of bad luck, that it can sometimes last a lifetime. So avoid these places whenever you can. But despite these horror stories, Ieles are not said to be malicious or seeking out to harm. Most of all, they want to be left alone, to practice their mysterious dances. They scorch to keep humans away from the land that they have claimed. So don't bother them, and stay clear of scorched places, and you will receive no trouble from these shadowy, wraith-like dancers. There is some debate as to whether the mischievous beings known as imps are their own class of fairies, or even fairies at all. Most commonly found in the rural and wild places of Europe, imps are described as short, squat creatures with devilish, gargoyle-like faces that look almost to have been carved out of stone. In fact, so stone-like do these hunched but agile creatures appear, that some have theorized that they literally are gargoyles that have been animated and brought to life. Imps have a reputation for pranks, mischief, and destruction. Wherever imps are found, so is discord and disorder. It is unclear whether imps cause these states, spreading pandemonium like a virus, or whether they are simply attracted to chaos and feed off it like flies around honey. Imps tend to move around in groups or perhaps gangs, and can sometimes be spotted, eyes flashing from the shadows, where some riot or wild event is underway. Historically, imps first appeared in Germanic fairy lore, where they were described as a lesser or subspecies of goblin. For this reason, it is unknown whether imps are a distinctive class of fairy or just another type of goblin. It could even be that goblins have as many subtypes as fairies do themselves, and imp is but one classification. Whatever the case, the similarities between imps and goblins cannot be denied. Both groups are comprised of fiendish pranksters who live for turmoil. Imps have also been associated with demons and the devil. Witches were accused of taking on imps as familiars during the witch trials far more often than any other fairy type. This is perhaps because imps are not thought to act independently, but as servants, minions, or foot soldiers to more powerful fae. They may not even have a will of their own aside from the desire to create chaos, and are perhaps only wakened from their deep stone slumbers when some particularly malicious fairy wants to start a panic. As part of a feud, or as part of a distraction so that some other nefarious plan can be put into motion. Whatever the case, these wild creatures are not to be trifled with. The mischief they cause knows no limits or bounds. They could just as easily trip you and laugh their evil, hysterical laughs when you fall into a puddle as they could shove you off a cliff and laugh as you fall to your death. It is perhaps for this reason that imps are not unleashed very often. The forces that control them may not have much control over them at all. Unleashing the imps may in this way be like starting a fire, a thing that must be strictly watched and contained, lest it get out of control. By humans, imps should always be avoided. But if you ever see one, or maybe a dozen, their eyes glittering in the shadows, run home as fast as you can, for something that you do not want to be caught up in is about to happen. something riotous. In Alaska, native people tell tales of the Urchin Hawk, a mysterious group of fairies that haunt the frozen forests and snow-capped mountains of this northern U.S. state. Though some sneer at these stories, dismissing them as superstitions, those who have spent time in the wide and empty places of the north and have caught a glimpse of these beings will swear to the truth of them. Referred to as little people by witnesses, the Urchin Hawk are most often described as a diminutive race, averaging between 1 to 3 feet in height. Dwelling in the mountains and in tunnels deep beneath the frigid tundra, the Urchin Hawk come to the surface most often at night and spread out in nocturnal hunting parties under the moon. Carrying torches, bows and arrows, and dressed in furs and animal skins, the Urchin Hawk are a race of hunters who live off the land. Indeed, these fairies are said to be master hunters, capable of bringing down wolves and caribou many times their own size from great distances away. They are also said to possess great strength and speed disproportionate to their size. Pilots flying over wide expanses have sometimes reported seeing caribou running impossibly on their sides, only to dip their planes lower and find the caribou is in fact being carried at a wicked speed by a humanoid creature the size of a small child. But unfortunately, the Urchin Hawk don't limit themselves to hunting animals. These fairies are occasionally known to hunt humans as well, especially women and children, who they abduct from isolated roads or even from their own beds in remote villages. What they do with their kidnapped prizes is unknown, though rare stories do exist of people escaping these predatory fae. These escapees, usually young children, tell similar tales of being dragged deep into the mountains by small, long-fingered creatures. One boy, who claims to have escaped the Urchin Hawk, said he met a human girl under the mountain who said she had been taken more than 40 years before, and yet hadn't aged a day in all that time. She also begged for help, suggesting she was not treated well by her fairy abductors. These and other stories suggest that the Urchin Hawk are a malicious people who mean to do us harm. When these fairies are not hunting or kidnapping humans, they find amusement in throwing rocks at travelers or luring them off the beaten trail into hostile and dangerous places. They have also been known to steal recent kills from human hunters, sneaking up on them without a sound, swiping their felled stag or caribou, and rushing away into darkness, leaving not so much as a footprint behind. For the hearts of the Urchin Hawk are as frigid as the land they roam, and you will find no mercy in them or their icy stares. So avoid Alaska's silent and lonely places, especially at night, when these cruel hunters stake claim to the frozen land and anything or anyone they find upon it. Thanks for watching, and special thanks to all my supporters on Patreon who are helping to keep this content alive. I really appreciate you guys as always. If you like this content and you like to support it on Patreon, there's a link in the description, including several other support options as well. If you have a fairy encounter story to share, I'm always collecting them, so please send them along. You'll find my email in the description. Please don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you're new. It really helps the channel when you do that. And press that bell for notifications. I've got a bunch more scary fairy encounter stories coming up in the next video, which I'll hopefully be able to get out sooner rather than later, so definitely stay tuned for that. And until next time, this has been a visit from your scary fairy godmother.